All right, folks, we're doing some light work today. This is going to be super low effort, but I wanted to do sort of an unscripted follow-up to the cosplay video essay that I made end of last year, released it in January, because there have been some additional topics that I wanted to cover, or some things that were said in that video that I wanted to unpack further based on comments and feedback and things like that. I've had a lot of people that said they really enjoyed the video. A lot of people said they really related to it. And I've also had one or two people come up to me at MomoCon that said they watched it, which I thought was really cool. I guess they saw me post the video in the MomoCon Facebook group, and that's how they found me, through one of the other communities. There was a question posted on Twitter by somebody that I follow, and they were asking, what's something that you're just like a hater about? Like, what are you really a hater about? One of our mutuals, who goes by Shiggies, who is a fellow cosplayer and Yu-Gi-Oh content creator, so does overlap within those two communities there. Huge shout out to Shiggy, she's awesome. She answered with something that I thought was very, very interesting, and I wanted to talk about that here. She talked about the fast fashionification of cosplay, which is something I hadn't really considered, especially because I don't really consume TikTok at all. I really don't like TikTok, but apparently she doesn't like TikTok either. She was talking about how much she hates it and how TikTok has resulted in this turning these young people, these like late teenagers, early 20s, into these like fast fashion influencers because in regards to cosplay. So she said, and I quote here, "The consumption of cosplay has changed over the last 15 years. Before, people would take pride in spending time making one cosplay that they would wear for months, even years. Cosplay wasn't as accessible. Amazon Prime didn't even exist. We were getting our costumes off of shady websites and they would take 3 months to get here. Now, with the introduction of Amazon and encouraged by TikTok, many cosplayers will wear a costume once and never again to fit what's trendy, in a similar fashion to traditional fast fashion. This is in part due to how cosplay influencers and TikTok require them to put out exorbitant amounts of content, and it all needs to be fresh and new to capture an audience." So I'll guess I'll unpack my thoughts on this. So I'm really of two minds as far as this goes. Deep down inside, I think I am also a huge hater when it comes to stuff like this, and I really do despise TikTok. Part of that might just be me getting older. I'm in my 30s now, and seeing the things that 18 through 22 year olds do these days, I just cringe. But I remember how cringe me and my peers were at that age too, and how we were probably looked at the same way by people that were older. Maybe I'm of two minds about this. The first thing is, part of me wants to go, who cares? Part of me wants to go, well, if they're not doing anything to hurt you, it doesn't really matter, yada yada. But where I think this is important, and I think where I can share some of the anxiety regarding this and relate to Shiggies with this, is that we already have a hard enough time getting the layman, getting normies to understand what we do, like what cosplay is about. And so this being kind of like a more mainstream interpretation of what cosplay is really sets us up for a terrible misconception from the average person. They just assume that cosplay is fast fashion, or that if you cosplay at all, then you're trying to be some kind of clout chaser or TikTok influencer, and that is what cosplay is. And obviously that couldn't be further from the truth. And again, I feel like this whole thing, this fast fashion thing, I really never see this happen in my circles. I never really hear about this happening, and I think it's mainly because I try to be very inactive with social media. I rarely ever post on Instagram. I don't have the Twitter app on my phone anymore for obvious reasons. And I just don't see this as much because most of my peers are in their late 20s, early 30s, if not older. And so I just don't see this very much. Like, my feed is not heavily saturated with people wearing 20 different Genshin cosplays a month. You know what I mean? Like, my feed is primarily people that are proud craftsmen. people like myself and like Shiggies that have been cosplaying for 15 plus years who make all of our stuff and are generally pretty proud of it. We maybe only make one or two, maybe a few more cosplays a year instead of this, you know, oh, I'm going to, like I said, wear 20 or 30 different cosplays from the same franchise while it's popular. And but like I said, I'm not hating on if someone wants to get into cosplay just to be a clout chaser or to be some kind of influencer, like I said in the main video, more power to them. It's not my thing, and I will kind of roll my eyes a little bit. Like it's not something that I encourage, but I'm not going to judge somebody super harshly for that. It's just not my thing. I'm going to keep the close company of people who get the same value and the same payoff that I do out of cosplay. It's just with this whole fast fashion thing, it makes it harder to maintain the perception that cosplay is a craftsman thing and not a fast fashion thing. So definitely understanding where she's coming from on that, and I wanted to unpack that topic a little bit more. I wanted to talk about a few other like cosplay social media things. So I see these memes every once in a while where someone will say, they'll post a picture of a cosplayer and they'll say something like, "This cosplay done right," or it'll be "the perfect cosplay doesn't exist" meme, you know what I mean? And I find that super toxic because the idea that the person sharing this meme knows what doing a cosplay correctly is just wrong. It's bullshit. There is no right or wrong way to do a cosplay, like I said. And if you like, I notice is they don't think that they're saying something that's harmful when they say that. I just want to really point out again, you as the cosplayer, if you are intimidated by cosplays that go viral or show up in memes or whatever, don't compare yourself to those people. Like, don't feel inferior because somebody made a meme with a cosplayer in it and that you have to hold yourself up to that standard. Like that virality and appearing in memes, or if somebody says this is the cosplay done right as a facetious like joke kind of thing, they're not like really saying that. It's like those people that are making those memes don't know what goes into cosplay, and they have really no right to judge what makes a good cosplay. I also see, and I want to be very, very careful with how I approach this one, but occasionally I will see someone, usually someone who is maybe not a veteran craftsman of cosplay, let's say, share with me or share with others a cosplayer of a franchise we like, and it will be some like absolutely, you know, picture perfect model Asian cosplayer who has like a shot for shot perfectly detailed recreation of the character, heavily edited digital backgrounds, visual effects, and their face will just look like a doll with heavy makeup and who knows what are kind of digital edits and stuff like that. And they're like, "Oh, look at how cool this cosplay is." And especially if you go and look at like their Twitter or whatever, you're gonna see that there's some cosplayer that has like 100,000 plus followers. Do not compare yourself to these people. Like, do not look at these like perfect, you know, pinnacle of perfection-esque 100,000 plus subscriber Asian cosplayers and take them at all seriously in terms of like what you want to impose upon yourself as to what you want to make as a cosplayer. Do not compare yourself to those people, because, and I honestly kind of think like somebody that shares a picture of somebody like that where their face looks like a doll and the photo is heavily edited with digital effects and digital backgrounds, somebody that shares that and says, "Oh, this is such goals," is really just unserious about the craft. There's a lot that we don't know behind the scenes about these. I'm not judging or making a blanket statement about anybody's cultural standards or how different cultures interpret cosplay, but what I am saying is that there's a lot of things we don't know. We don't know the budget that went into that photography. We don't know the budget that went into the cosplay. It is a different culture over there, and so when you have somebody that is, you know, basically beaten the algorithm into submission and has hundreds of thousands or more followers, and because their cosplays look like this, it is just such a recipe for failure for you to compare yourself to that. And I just really cannot, I really significantly discourage people to do that. So here's another thing I talked about in the main video. I talked about, and I wish I would have unpacked this further, because I had the idea to record some B-roll of myself just looking at some of the 3D print projects that I had and talking about all the different methods, the different construction techniques that I was shown over time, but it couldn't really fit in the main video. It was really long and I wanted to keep the pace going. I didn't want to have like this 10-15 minute break where I just show this B-roll and talked about nonsense for a minute. So I'm saving that for this video where we can afford to do that. When it comes to making cosplay and construction techniques, materials, methods, and even when you go and watch different people's tutorials, just be prepared that everyone is going to have a different idea of what the best way is to do something, and they are 100% certain that their way of doing it is correct. And they will tell you that the way, not everybody, but some of the people will tell you the way you're doing it is wrong. Now, the right way to go about this is just to listen to a little bit of everybody and try the different techniques yourself and figure out what works for you. And I'll give you a specific example. So the way that I finish 3D printed props is, once you have all the pieces printed out, you can glue them together with super glue. You can even use instant set spray, but there's certain super glues that you can buy like Hobbytown that are used for modeling that have this fusing property with plastic specifically. So when you're using PLA and you use this super glue, the pieces will permanently bond. And it is very, 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 very difficult to separate them without breaking them. It is very permanent. And obviously you have wooden dowel rods that run the length of the inside of the prop if it's been modeled correctly to include those, and that adds support and structure to the inside of it so that no one part of a larger prop is under too much stress. So you super glue it together, and then you will take the 3M Bondo spot and glazing putty, and in a safe and non-toxic environment, we'll talk to that, you spread that into the gaps between the pieces that you glue together to fill in that gap, and then any other gaps you think need to be filled in throughout the 3D printed prop or pieces that didn't come out correctly. And then becomes the sanding part. I start out with 80 grit sandpaper, sand that thing really rough, and then it's wet sanding. It's wet sand 120. Spray it with automotive filler primer, which builds up the material ever so slightly to fill in those print lines and make the print lines invisible to give you a nice smooth finish. So wet sand 120 filler primer, wet sand 220 filler primer, wet sand 400 filler primer, wet sand 600 filler primer, wet sand 800 filler primer, all the way up until however smooth you want it. Most props I can stop around 800, but some of them you want to go up 1200, 2000, whatever, especially if you're trying to get it to be like glass smooth, like you're trying to do like a Mandalorian helmet or whatever. And that's the way that I do it. And a lot of people also do it that way, but some people will be like, don't use Bondo, use wood filler putty. Or they will say, don't do any of that shit. Take a rag and ever so slightly wet it with acetone and wipe the wet rag gently on the prop, and it will dissolve just the top like millimeter of material and get rid of those print lines, and it'll be smoother. Or they'll say use UV resin to where it creates a layer of resin over the top of the product that is, or the prop that makes it smooth. Or they'll say use XTC 3D, which is a product that I have purchased and I intend to try at some point, but apparently it has a very finicky curing temperature. But it's a smooth cast product that you can put over a 3D printed piece to smooth it out. And create, again, like I said, that layer of resin so you don't have to do all the sanding and filling, etc. Everyone will tell you that all of these, like the people that advocate for those different methods will be like, my method works, it's the best method. But all of those methods work. You just have to try all of them to figure out what works best for you. The reason why I'm using the method I use is because I've done all of the other ones. I had problems with so like the wood filler putty, for example. Couldn't keep the wood filler putty from drying up in the cup, and I also could not get it to apply smoothly and minimally enough to where I could sand it off. There was a prop that I almost ruined because I applied too much of the wood filler putty to it, and I couldn't sand enough of it off without ruining details on other parts of the prop. I would have need like some very specific like nail files and model files, and I think I actually did have to take like a model kit file and like gouge out some of the wood filler putty to get it off of there. The only benefit of the wood filler putty is that it's completely non-toxic, so you can spread it with your fingers, whereas the Bondo is toxic and you need to have it outside in your garage. You need to spread it with a sponge. I actually spread it with the corner pieces of the EVA foam floor mats because they have like that strip at the top where the foam floor mats connect to each other, and you can never use that piece for anything. So I just use that piece to spread the Bondo on there. You got to really get it deep in those cracks. But and again, the XTC 3D, like that stuff is really good. It's expensive. It's reputable, but specifically with my situation, it has a very finicky curing temperature, and if it doesn't cure correctly, it's going to be like sticky and goopy, and it will ruin your prop. The only reason why I go with the method I go with is because I've tried the other one. So that's the advice I'm giving you, is try everything. Like do a little bit of everything and find out what works best. When it comes to treating EVA foam to get ready for paint, I have completely stopped using Plastidip. I used Plastidip for years, but I started using the jar of the Prime stuff by Prop Monkey Studios, and it's like hit the foam with the heat gun. Obviously, the heat gun shrinks up the pores and already makes the foam less porous, which is what you want. You want it to not be porous so it will take paint. And then like heat gun, one coat of that Prime stuff, and it's ready for paint. You probably want to do more. You probably want to do two, but you can, if you apply it thoroughly and you really work it in those layers and smooth out those brush strokes, heat gun, one coat, it's ready to go. Would never use Plastidip anymore. It's insane how well that stuff works. But if you were like me and used Plastidip forever because it worked, there's still an incentive to try something else, because you never know what's going to work better. And so that's what I meant in the video when I said there are many different construction techniques and methods out there, and everybody's going to tell you that their method is the correct one. What you just need to listen to everybody and try everything. You'll find out for yourself what you like, and then you'll be out there, like I just did, advocating for the method that you prefer the most. Which brings me to the topic of safety. So this is something I did not get a chance to talk about in the main video, but safety when it comes to cosplay construction is huge, and a lot of people already know this, but really where I wanted to kind of come down on this is how some of the cosplay tutorials you'll watch online from some generally pretty reputable people, they will not discuss safety on the level that I feel like they need to, and that's a big problem. So if you are watching a cosplay tutorial where they're talking about, you know, using certain chemicals or using certain tools, it's definitely worth looking up any kind of safety concerns with that stuff. And I'll give you a good example of a good safety and bad safety when it comes to cosplay tutorials. So as I mentioned in the cosplay video, and anybody that knows me knows this, but I've been a member of the 405th, which is the Halo cosplay group, since like 2010, since like before Halo Reach came out. And I didn't get a chance to make my own suit until like 2016. So I was a lurker on the forums for many years until I finally made my own Halo armor. And I remember back in the day, there was a tutorial on the forums, and I don't remember the guy that did the tutorial right now, unfortunately, and I'm not happy about the fact that I don't remember that. But those of you who have been on there, you probably know who I'm talking about. But back in those days, some of the many various ways they would make props and make helmets was with the Pepakura method, which I talked about in the video, where you take the paper craft model and you cover it in fiberglass resin and Bondo, and you're able to kind of sculpt details into the Bondo until the correct amount of details have been achieved, and then you can make a mold out of it, and then you have like a nice resin cast mold of the helmet you're actually going to wear. But there was one tutorial where they were talking about slush casting rondo inside of a Pepakura helmet. What that is you would add Bondo and fiberglass resin together, and it would create this ultra hard substance, and it was still like runny and liquid, and so you could let the material roll and coat the inside of your papercraft model. And that papercraft model became hard as a rock. You could chuck that thing into the ground and it would not break or dent or anything. It was very hard. So it was cool. But when the guy was doing the tutorial, he talked about safety, and he said you're gonna need gloves. You're going to need plastic cups. You're going to need to double up on your plastic cups, because when you pour the fiberglass resin into the plastic cup, it's so corrosive that it will bleed through your cups. You need to have like multiple layers of plastic cups. And he also said you need to wear a respirator and be either outdoors or in a well-ventilated garage, because the fiberglass resin is toxic. But he specifically said you needed a respirator that was rated for organic fumes, and that, any old respirator won't do, or the little paper dust mask things people were wearing during COVID will not do. You need to have the right kind of respirator, or you can develop a serious respiratory illness from working with this stuff. It's very serious. And so that was a very, very good tutorial. He was very, very thorough with safety. Now here's a bad example, and I do not think that I'm throwing this person under the bus when I talk about this. But this was an example of, I actually, I'm not going to name the cosplayer, but there's a very, very, very big household name cosplayer who does tutorials on their YouTube channel, and she was doing an EVA foam guide and talking about different products you can use to attach pieces together. And she was talking about contact cement, which is essentially the best way to connect pieces of EVA foam to each other. There was not one single mentioning of safety in relation to contact cement. And anybody that's used it knows that it has like these noxious fumes. And once again, you need to be using it in either outdoors or a well-ventilated garage or with a respirator. If you're just cracking open contact cement in your living room and inhaling that shit, that's bad news. And she never mentioned it one single time. And I thought that was pretty irresponsible from such a big name cosplayer on a tutorial for new people. That's something I would significantly advise people to really consider when it comes to watching these different tutorials. Is how much do they talk about safety? How much do they seem to be aware of safety? And then, even regardless of what they mention, what they don't mention, look up the safety guidelines of the product that you're going to be using. I think is extremely important. So I think that's it for this little follow-up. I may do another one of these if I can think of even more topics, and I'm still considering doing some more cosplay videos on the channel. If I'm already working on remaking old stuff anyway, then I might as well do like a little build guide or a build documentary. And we will see you guys next time.